Life in the wilderness. On Boone's early journeys, he took only what was needed. His supplies included guns, traps, ammunition, and blankets. Survival. Frontier explorers carried long rifles for hunting and protection. They also carried hunting knives. Their clothing was often made from animal skins. Many explorers and settlers, including Boone, wore hats made of beaver fur. While exploring Kentucky, Boone had little problem finding food to eat. The wilderness held a great amount of wildlife, including buffalo and turkey. Attracting game. Food was often cooked over an open fire. Gathering salt at salt licks was an important part of life in the wilderness. Salt licks are areas where natural deposits of salt form and attract animals seeking nutrients that salt provides. Salt licks were good areas for hunting as well as for gathering salt for cooking and preserving meat. Daniel Boone used a type of gun called a long rifle. These guns were called long rifles because the barrels were as long as 4 feet or 1 meter. Boone and other hunters marked trails, sometimes carving into trees to remember the path they had traveled. Beef jerky. During his travels, Boone ate dried meat known as jerky to survive in the wilderness. Ask an adult to help you make beef jerky. Ingredients: 3 pounds of beef, 2/3 cups of Worcestershire sauce, 2/3 cups soy sauce, 1 teaspoon black pepper, 1 teaspoon garlic powder, 1 teaspoon onion powder. Directions: 1. Cut meat into thin slices. 2. Mix all other ingredients in a large plastic zipper bag. 3. Add sliced meat to bag and refrigerate. Turn bag to mix meat every 2 hours. Refrigerate overnight. 4. Drain meat in a colander and pat dry with paper towels. 5. Place a sheet of aluminum foil on bottom rack of oven. Set oven at lowest temperature. 6. Carefully place meat slices directly onto foil. Leave the oven door open a crack to allow moisture to escape. Drying time takes between 4 and 12 hours, depending on the thickness of meat slices. The best beef jerky is firm and dry, not spongy. Background: Boone was often away for long periods of time on hunting trips. Hunters set up camp and used it as a base while they were out hunting animals for their furs. The animal furs were brought to town at the end of the season and sold. Winter hunts. Boone and his traveling companions were at the mercy of the weather. While many of Boone's travels took place during summer months, the best hunting was often done in the winter. Hunters wore animal skins and furs during winter months, which protected them from cold temperatures. Warmth was also generated by campfire. Natural remedies. Illness and injury were not uncommon for Boone. Cuts and other injuries were often suffered during his wilderness travel and hunting trips. Boone used natural remedies to heal some of these cuts, including an ointment made with oak bark peeled from a tree and pounded into a jam-like substance. Boone learned of natural remedies from native groups and hunters when he was young. Daniel Boone's skills as a hunter are legendary. In this illustration, an artist shows Boone wrestling a bear. Although this event may not have happened, Boone did hunt bear for its meat. Fighting loneliness. Hunting and survival were the main pastimes of Boone and his fellow travelers and settlers. In the evenings, stories were shared around a campfire. For those who could read, books provided entertainment on long hunting trips. Boone's favorite book was Gulliver's Travels. On special occasions, such as when Boone helped negotiate a treaty with the Cherokee, feasts were held. At these feasts, many buffalo were cooked and drink was shared. Shawnee and Cherokee. Before European settlement, more than 30 native tribes lived in the northeast area of North America. These tribes belonged to one of 2 major language groups, the Algonquin or Iroquoian. These groups spoke different languages and had different customs and traditions. Warring nations. Relations between some Algonquin and Iroquoian groups were not peaceful. They fought over territory and alliances with Europeans and Americans. Daniel Boone came into contact with several native tribes, including the Shawnee and Cherokee. The Shawnee spoke an Algonquin language and the Cherokee an Iroquoian language. Natural life. North American native peoples relied on their natural environment for survival, hunting, and farming for food. Men were responsible for hunting animals such as deer using bow and arrows. Meat from the animals was eaten and their skins were used to make shelter and clothing. Bones of animals were used to make tools, including cooking utensils. Native men also cleared land suitable for planting. Women planted and cared for crops including corn, pumpkin, beets, squash, and tomatoes. Background. Corn was a major Native American crop. Food was also found in the forest where berries, apples, and nuts were harvested. Native peoples ate fish caught in rivers and streams, which they traveled using canoes. Native and frontier women. Natives and frontier settlers shared common ways of life. The lives of women on the frontier and Native women were in some ways similar, as husbands often left for long periods of time on hunting trips. Both Native and frontier women took care of the crops and raised the children. With their husbands away, frontier women also had to defend the home against intruders. Native leaders. Chiefs were the leaders of Native communities. Groups could have more than one chief, each with a different area of responsibility. Certain chiefs oversaw war while others ensured village life ran smoothly. There was a common belief among Native groups in a great spirit which gave life to all things. Animals and plants found in nature were important spiritual symbols for Native groups. Spiritual leaders in Native communities helped heal the sick and injured, both physically and spiritually. Natural remedies found in the forests were used for different healing purposes by Native tribes. The Cherokee crafted masks out of wood or gourds called booger masks. The masks were thought to represent evil spirits and were worn in ceremonies. Adopted family. When Boone was taken prisoner by the Shawnee, he did not resist his captivity. He was familiar and friendly with the natives, even going on hunting trips with men in the tribe. It was a Native tradition that some prisoners of war were adopted to replace dead family members. Boone became well liked by Blackfish, the chief who adopted him, and was given the Native name Sheltowee or Big Turtle. Above, look closely for the Native hunters in this illustration of a traditional hunting method. After the arrival of Europeans, Native groups began using guns for hunting. Competition for hunting grounds increased among Native groups and settlers as the supply of animals decreased. Friends and enemies. In Boone's many encounters with the Shawnee and Cherokee, he made friends and enemies among both. In 1775, Boone traveled to friendly Cherokee villages around Kentucky, trying to convince the Cherokee to attend a peace treaty meeting being held at Sycamore Shoals, Tennessee. The meeting took place on March 17, 1775, and a treaty was signed. For 3 wagon loads of goods such as clothing, blankets, firearms, alcohol, and other items, the Cherokee gave the Transylvania Company the right to settle Kentucky. Below, some Algonquin-speaking Native groups made dome-shaped wigwams. After contact with settlers, some Native villages were modeled after frontier settlements with long cabins mixed along wigwams. After the expeditions. In 1779, Daniel Boone decided to leave Boonesboro and explore new opportunities, first founding a village in Kentucky called Boone's Station. In the years after, he led attacks against Shawnee villages, hunted, worked as a land surveyor, and moved his family a number of times. Active life. In 1781, Boone was elected as a representative in the Virginia Assembly. 2 years later, he moved his family to Limestone on the Ohio River, opened a tavern, and worked surveying land along the Ohio River. In 1784, The Adventures of Colonel Daniel Boone by John Filson was published. The book was written to encourage people to settle in Kentucky, telling of the area's fertile land and good hunting. On the move. As years passed, more American settlers moved west into Kentucky. The area was becoming too populated and regulated by government for Boone's liking. Despite his role in settling Kentucky, Boone eventually lost all of his property there because the United States government did not recognize his land claim. An advertising poster from the 1830s. Before railroads were built, trails and roads were the only way of travel over land. Land surveyors were hired by companies building roads to map the areas and determine the best route for the roads to pass through. Land in Missouri. In 1797, Boone's son Daniel Morgan Boone traveled to Missouri to scout land. The Spanish controlled Missouri and other territories in the west of North America, and Spanish authorities invited the Boones to immigrate. In 1798, Boone led his family west to Missouri. He was appointed leader of a district in Missouri and granted land there. After settling in Missouri, Boone made 2 more trips to Kentucky before his death. The Louisiana Purchase. With the 1803 Louisiana Purchase, the United States bought more than 800,000 square miles or 2 million square kilometers of land from France for $15 million. The land stretched from New Orleans, Louisiana in the south to Canada in the north. It also included Missouri. Following the Louisiana Purchase, Boone went to the United States government asking for recognition of his land ownership in Missouri, which he did not get until 1814. President Thomas Jefferson originally only wanted to buy the French part of New Orleans from the French. French Foreign Minister Talleyrand instead offered to sell all of the Louisiana Territory to the United States. The purchase more than doubled the size of the country. Boone's death. Daniel Boone died on September 26, 1820, 3 days after falling ill and refusing medications from the doctor. He was 85 years old. He was buried on family land next to his wife, who had died in 1813. Boone's explorations had directly led to the settlement of Kentucky, but he contributed more to the foundations of America. By 1800, more than 200,000 settlers had used the Wilderness Road to settle in the area. Commerce, trade, and businesses grew after people populated areas of Kentucky Boone had explored. Changing ways. As American settlers pushed into Kentucky and farther west, Native American groups such as the Shawnee and Cherokee were forced off their traditional lands. Native Americans could do little to stop the settlers from coming. Some native groups eventually relocated farther west, others joined together. With fewer and fewer animals available to hunt, the lifestyle of native groups changed. By the 1860s, Native Americans were forced onto reservations or certain areas of land set aside by the federal government for them. Reservations were only a small fraction of the land Native peoples held before American settlers moved past the Appalachians and into the West. Background. In 1830, U.S. President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act. Under the act, the Cherokee and other eastern Native groups were forced to leave their land and move west of the Mississippi River. The 800-mile, or 1,287-kilometer trip that the natives were forced to make became known as the Trail of Tears. Many people died on the journey from disease, lack of food, and cold. 1784. Publication of the Adventures of Colonel Daniel Boone. 1814. United States government grants Boone land in Missouri. 1817. Boone goes on his last hunt and falls ill. 1820. Daniel Boone dies on September 26th. Daniel Boone's legacy. Daniel Boone's travels helped open the West for early American settlers who followed in his footsteps. Boone is remembered for his feats as a frontiersman, able to survive in the wilderness while exploring, blazing trails, and building forts. Remembering Boone. Many sites in America pay tribute to Daniel Boone. The Boone homestead near Reading, Pennsylvania, where Daniel Boone was born, is today a museum open to the public. The famous Wilderness Road that Daniel Boone helped create is today part of U.S. Route 25, or the Dixie Highway, one of the most historic in America. Part of the wilderness Boone traveled and explored is today a 704,000-acre or 284,909-hectare forest in eastern Kentucky known as the Daniel Boone National Forest. Even the site of Boone's death in Charleston County, Missouri, is today a museum. Inspiring exploration. Members of the Boone family continued moving west after Daniel Boone's death. His son, Daniel Morgan Boone, was one of the first settlers of Kansas. Boone's grandson explored the Rocky Mountains. A statue stands at the Museum of the Cherokee Indian in North Carolina. American legend. After the publication of The Adventures of Colonel Daniel Boone, Boone became a role model for other pioneers who settled the west of North America. Over time, Boone became an American legend with many myths surrounding his life and adventures. Hundreds of books, television programs, movies, and stories tell of Boone's life and adventures. Many of them are not based on fact and have added to myths surrounding him. Background. Actors portray Daniel Boone and his brother Israel in a 1960s TV series. 1804. Famous American explorers Meriwether, Lewis Topp, and William Clark Bottom expanded upon Boone's exploration of the West when they set out from Missouri to reach the Pacific Ocean on the Oregon coast.